So, so welcome everyone. Let's get started talking about menopause. So, like I've said, I would be grateful if we could have this be an interactive and informal discussion. It's one of my very favorite topics, and I'm happy to have people who want to talk about it and explore it, right? So, let's let's get started. Here's what we're going to do with this time. We've got just under an hour. We're going to talk about peri and menopause. So, welcome to your peri and menopause. Which phase are you in? And what's the difference between peri and menopause? And on this note, I would be really happy if, again, I'd love this to be interactive, so it's not just me speaking to me. Um, if you could drop in the chat box, first of all, where in the world are you sitting? And secondly, where are you on your menopausal journey? Just so I know who's where and how. So after we've welcomed you to your menopausal journey, then we're going to meet our hormones. There's estrogen, also known as the Diva. Progesterone is her chaperone. And what is it like when they leave us? So I'm just getting my cup of tea. I hope you guys are all comfortable with your cups of tea or whatever. Uh, then, once we've met our hormones, we're going to talk about what are our new needs. What are the needs of the body and of the brain? We'll have a quick chat about hormone therapy because it's a hot topic and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation. So I'm not a doctor. I don't give advice. But what I can do is just say, what does the research show and what questions should you ask your doctor should you want to do that? And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So think about your questions as we go along. Please drop them in the chat. And whatever we don't have time to get to today, I will come back to you by email. And also, I'll share the slides. I'll send them by email after. Okay. Paola, so far so good? ¿Está bien? Okay. Okay. So, welcome to your menopausal journey. So then, where are you in this journey? And what differentiates the different phases? So we start off our life, on our little journey in pre-menopause. And in theory, this is when our menstrual cycle is regular. And then we traverse along this little journey. And one day we notice that our periods are starting to get irregular. We might have a few symptoms, but we might also not associate that with perimenopause. This tends to start in our early 40s, but the one consistent theme that you'll recognize throughout this presentation is every woman is different. But the average age is in the early 40s. And you'll know you're in early perimenopause when your menstrual cycles are suddenly they're 7 days shorter or longer than they used to be. Right? That's the kind of the definition of early perimenopause. And then you'll traverse down this road, and one day you'll go for 2 months or more without a period. That means you're in late perimenopause. And that's when things really start getting fun. Then one day you're going to have your last period. Now, of course, you're not going to know it's your last, right? You won't know until 12 months later, you'll hit the big M of menopause, right? Menopause is one day in our lives. Mine, in theory, should be in April, unless I get a little surprise. I will celebrate that, by the way. So anyone who's going to be in Geneva, you're warmly welcome to my menopause party. So menopause, again, it's one day in our lives, and everything that comes after that, we're in post-menopause. Now, I'm so happy that in mainstream media, in society, we're talking about menopause. But what we tend to be talking about is this part, perimenopause and the symptoms of perimenopause. What I feel that we don't speak about enough, and I want to speak about more in this session, is what happens in this whole rest of our lives. What's going on and what should we be doing? Why don't you want to go? Okay. So what's the difference between peri and post? Now, I'll use the word, I say menopause is one day in our lives, which it is. But I'll use post-menopause and menopause interchangeably. But what differentiates these two, because they're quite different. So in peri, again, early peri, our cycles are 7 days shorter or longer. And then as we move into late perimenopause, we can go 2 months or more without a cycle, without menstruation. In peri, our estrogen is fluctuating. Our progesterone is declining. So this fluctuation, by the way, this is what makes estrogen a diva. And this is what makes peri really interesting. Progesterone is declining, and our symptoms tend to be linked in peri to this fluctuation of estrogen alongside declining progesterone, which we call estrogen dominance. We will come to that. It tends to start in our early 40s. It can last 4 to 10 years. And yeah, our symptoms tend to increase the closer we get to menopause. Then when we're in postmenopause, we know we're there because we haven't had a menstruation for 12 months or more. Our estrogen is low and our progesterone is almost completely gone. The symptoms, it's no longer because of fluctuating estrogen and low progesterone. It's linked to low estrogen and almost no progesterone. The average age for menopause is 51, but again, every woman is different. It lasts the rest of our lives. And what's notable about it is that our symptoms change. The symptoms are linked again to that low estrogen, low progesterone. And so the symptoms change a bit. And also what's notable is the health risks increase. Okay, we're going to look at that. So symptoms of menopause. Well, there are a lot. And there's a reason why there are so many different potential symptoms, and that is that we have estrogen receptors everywhere in the body. And that means that estrogen has an effect everywhere. You have the estrogen receptor and you have the estrogen molecule, and when it binds, that's when it exerts some kind of effect, right? So the fact that we have these receptors everywhere in the body means that it wants estrogen to bind and do something there. So that's why we can have symptoms everywhere. And again, every woman is different. So I would love it if you would tell me what are your main symptoms of menopause. If you'll drop those in the chat box, I'm curious to know what are the things that bother you the most or that you're most noticeable. I would say in my own little menopausal journey, probably got, I probably got about half of these that I noticed, some more than others. Yeah, digestive problems. What women tend to experience more often than not in peri, and again, this is linked to the hormonal fluctuations, or especially estrogen fluctuations. You have irregular periods, mood swings, can be brain fog, disturbed sleep. That was my big one. Fatigue. And then here we are in menopause. And again, those symptoms are linked to low hormones. It's more the time of hot flushes, of night sweats. Mood tends to be low, tendency towards low mood rather than mood swings. Everything gets dry. We get weight gain, and this is when the health risks start to appear. Okay. So here we are. Let's meet our hormones. First of all, this this is your hormonal life. And this chart, I just want to say, explains everything. It really explains everything. Um, we start off here, estradiol, that's the most potent form of estrogen. Progesterone is the sweet chaperone. And estradiol, so we start off here in our childhood, both are low. And then remember puberty? This was puberty. So estrogen starts to become a diva. She's getting all wound up and getting active. And progesterone, the sweet chaperone, is trying to keep up with her, but doesn't really manage until we reach our reproductive years. And again, every woman is different, but in theory, it should look like this. This is what our kind of monthly cycles should look like. Estrogen is, she's less diva-like. She's just floating up and down, and progesterone is covering all the bases. She's up and down. And then we hit perimenopause. And so this has been my life for the last few years. I'm probably right here. And estrogen is in full diva form, right? She's all over the place with a general tendency going down. Um, and progesterone, well, she tries, she gives it her best, and then she peters out. And then in menopause, both are pretty low. Okay. So this can describe the life of a woman. Um, and a few things are notable. One is that, if we think of what are the, let's say, tumultuous years in our lives, hormonal years, it's puberty, yeah, here, and perimenopause here. And two reasons for that. One is because estrogen is being a diva. But the second reason is that, see this gap between estrogen and progesterone. This is what we call estrogen dominance, right? Or unopposed estrogen. This is what causes the big symptoms of perimenopause, also of puberty, but it's a lot more here. And then again, low hormones in menopause. Okay? Your life explained in one chart. Okay, let's meet estrogen, the diva. And the thing is, when she's good, she's really good. She's helpful, she's beneficial. And again, we have estrogen receptors throughout the body, so she's doing great things everywhere. She's helping our brain. She's helping our bones, our bladder, our ovaries. Interestingly, she thickens the uterus lining. You'll see why that's important when we come to progesterone. Okay, so she's doing lots of great things throughout the body. And uh, that's why we want to maintain this protection for as long as we can, right? Okay, so far so good. It's okay. I haven't lost anyone. Yeah. Okay. Now we come to progesterone, her sweet chaperone. And I said we would mention the uterine lining. So estrogen thickens the uterus lining, the uterine lining, and progesterone thins it, right? So between the two of them, like progesterone helps estrogen to calm that down, right? We don't want too much uterine lining or we end up with endometriosis, right? And she does lots of other good things. She regulates our blood sugar. Blood sugar is super important. I'll mention it a few times. It's not only about not eating sweets, right? Progesterone is great for sleep. Yeah, it helps our thyroid, boosts our libido. It also, so estrogen produces breast tissue, whereas progesterone calms that down. That helps to protect us from breast cancer, for example. So she does lots of good things. She's kind of the forgotten sweet sister, but progesterone's important. Now, this is what happens when, remember that gap between estrogen and progesterone. This is what we can experience when we have estrogen dominance. And I see a lot of this in my clients in especially late perimenopause, and early postmenopause. Um, yeah, the heavy periods, painful cramps, breast tenderness, these, when I have a client presenting with these, it's a pretty good indicator. Uterine fibroids, that's because estrogen thickens the uterus, progesterone thins it. So these are all, yeah, headaches, migraines, brain fog. These are all symptoms of that unopposed progesterone. So it's not only about hormonal levels, it's also about the dance between the two, right? It's that balance between the two. Okay, so when estrogen goes, we miss her, right? These, we start to have symptoms in the brain, hot flushes, night sweats, mood disorders, cognitive decline. Not to say that these things all happen, but when we lose her protection, this is the kind of symptoms and risks we can face. Yeah, our hair starts thinning. We might get facial hair. Our bones become more brittle. Everything gets dry. Yeah, weight gain, especially around the belly. Um, yeah, so the symptoms change when estrogen is low and the health risks start increasing. And again, it's because we have those estrogen receptors everywhere in the body. Okay. Uh, two molecules or two components that try to be estrogen wannabes in the body. Phytoestrogen, these are the good guys, and xenoestrogens, those are the bad guys. And both of them in the body have a molecular structure that mimics estrogen. So all those estrogen receptors that I said we have, um, these molecules can bind to that estrogen receptor. And when it binds, it can have an effect that is similar to estrogen. So the good guys, these are helpful both when estrogen is too high and when it's too low. So when it's too high, so in, for example, this estrogen dominance, what it can do is it can bump off the more potent estrogen. Oh yeah, and these have a weaker estrogenic effect than the real things, right? So it can displace the more potent estrogen, which is a good thing when we have too much estrogen, but also when we don't have enough estrogen, like in menopause, they can top up estrogen. It's still a weaker version, but the best sources of these are going to be flax seeds. They need to be crushed because the phytoestrogen is in the husk, right? And you don't get it if it's not crushed. Soy, but not all soy, coming from edamame, and fermented soy, so miso, tempeh. You're not going to find it in highly processed soy like soy milk, um, but in the less processed and the fermented. And in smaller amounts, you can get some in legumes. Uh, and then xenoestrogens, these are also known as endocrine disruptors, endocrine being hormones, right? And you can find those in plastics, cosmetics, cleaning products, non-stick cookware, and pesticides, all those kind of environmental toxins. Those, I think it's underrated how much those can disrupt our hormonal system because again, it binds to the receptor, but then disrupts everything. Okay. So now, um, yeah, sorry, just checking the time. So what should you do with all this, right? Um, so we've got a lot going on in our body. There's a lot of talk about symptoms, talk about risks, But there are things that we should be doing. It is a new chapter in our lives. And it's, yeah, we have different needs throughout the body. So here's some of them. From muscle, we start losing muscle mass. In fact, we start losing it from the age of 30. Once we reach our 60s, we on average lose 1% of muscle per year. And it's really a case of use it or lose it, right? And muscle is important for protecting our bones, for protecting us from falling. Um, yeah, it's what they say also is that, maybe when we were younger, we wanted to be lifting weights at low weight and high repetition. That changes from menopause. We want to start doing heavier weights, lower repetition, right? So strength training becomes really important. Digestion, I did see briefly that someone mentioned digestive issues. Yeah, that becomes important. Everything starts slowing down, right? Our fats metabolism slows down, so does our digestion. And we need our digestion to function properly to be able to absorb nutrients. Um, our bones become more brittle. This is probably also underrated. We think about osteoporosis as something that happens to old women, but it starts it starts in midlife, right? This thinning of the bone when they become more brittle. Um, Adrenal health becomes really important. The adrenal glands sit just on top of the kidneys. They produce our stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. They also produce estrogen. Once we hit menopause with that really low level of estrogen, um, the only sources of estrogen in the body become the adrenal glands and the fat cells. It's why we tend to gain weight with menopause. It's our body's way of trying to be kind and give us more estrogen. But so then we need to rely on the adrenal glands. And in a shootout between cortisol and estrogen, if the adrenals have to choose which one to make, cortisol and stress hormones will always win. Okay, so we need to take good care of the adrenal glands, and the best way we do that is through sleep, through stress management, right? Detoxification becomes important because the estrogen, when she's being a diva, unless she's bound to the receptor, she's floating around out there in your space, and she's up to no good. And she's only going to cause problems. The only way that we want estrogen invited in our bodies is when it's bound to the receptor. And otherwise, we want her to pack on out. And that's where detoxification becomes important. Blood sugar, my clients, one of you who has been my client, who's here, knows how much I talk about blood sugar because it's we do become less resistant to insulin as well from perimenopause onwards. And blood sugar is also known as glucose, is the fuel for the body and the brain. The brain cannot survive without glucose, right? For any time. And when the brain doesn't have glucose, it's going to go increase cortisol, the stress hormone, and say, get me some glucose or we're going to die. And that puts stress here on the adrenals. So our risk of cardiovascular health increases. Our brain health becomes more important. I'll say more on that. We lose some of our resilience to stress. That's physiological. And sleep becomes more challenging. It becomes also more important. We get less sleep as we age, not because we need less sleep, but the body just has a harder time getting it. So it becomes more important to prioritize. Okay, about brain health. I don't, if any of you know Dr. Lisa Mosconi, she's one of my heroes. She's a neuroscientist who does research on women's brains and women's health. And she's come out with a book and basically says menopause is it's a condition of the brain. It's all about the brain. We tend to take the brain for granted, and yet it's our hungriest organ, and it needs healthy fats, especially omega-3. It needs this for the brain structure, for the neuronal signaling. It needs protein to build neurotransmitters, to repair, and we cannot store amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So we need a steady supply of it, right? It needs steady glucose, that blood sugar. Like I said, the brain can't survive any time at all without glucose. So blood sugar becomes important. It needs a number of nutrients. It needs our vitamin D, our B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, iron, antioxidants. The brain is great at sucking up and storing toxins. So antioxidants that can mop that up. It needs hydration. So in menopause, what's recommended is between 2 and 3 liters a day, right? So I know a lot of women that struggle to reach 2 liters a day, but really what's recommended is 3. And what's said is that even mild dehydration impairs our cognition. So, and of course, we know it needs restorative sleep. Okay. About movement, we talked about strength. We need strength training. And we want that to maintain our bones and protect us from falling. We need flexibility. We need to keep our joints moving, again, to protect us from falling. We need balance. Yeah, so again, protecting us from falling, but also just maintaining our core and our joint strength. We need low impact weight-bearing exercise. From menopause onwards, where maybe before menopause, we would have really benefited from high impact aerobic exercise. From menopause onward, we want it to be more low impact, still weight bearing to protect our bones, but not the high intensity. I know one of you mentioned to me earlier, Dr. Stacy Sims, who is another one of my heroes, talks a lot about women's strength training, well, physical fitness. And she's also a researcher on women's health. And what she has explained is that from menopause onwards, we need to be on the extreme. So heavy weights, low impact, not moderate impact, but if we're going to, if you're going to do high intensity, it should be a full out sprint, right? Full to the point of exhaustion. Same with strength training. Weights to the point of exhaustion, but not in the middle, right? So, okay, I'll go through these quickly because I want to leave enough time for Q&A. So in terms of food, we need protein. Why? To build neurotransmitters. It helps regulate our blood sugar, helps us to build muscle, and it needs to be steady because the body can't store amino acids. It also helps with weight management. How do we do that? We have protein with every meal, and especially a protein-dense breakfast. The best secret for weight loss, weight management. Pulses are really great sources, nuts and seeds. If you're going to do animal products, eggs are great. If you're going to do dairy, go for full fat. Skimmed milk is terrible for hormones. It disrupts the entire hormone balance, and lean meats. And you definitely want protein before and even more after a workout. Okay, healthy fats. Why? Because hormones are made from fats. It's important, again, for brain health, for the structure, for the connectivity. We need healthy fats to absorb our fat-soluble nutrients. So that's A, D, E, and K. Um, it needs fats to get the molecule over the cell lining. And how can we do that? Oily fish. Oily fish is great for omega-3. Avocados, olives, nuts, and seeds. Um, and then just a note on oils. So if you're going to cook, olive and coconut oil or ghee are good for coconut E for cooking. I don't know what that means. And flaxseed or walnuts, the polyunsaturated for salads, not for cooking. Okay. Whole grains, why? Because we need the fiber, and also it's going to feed our microbiome. Again, it's whole grains versus highly refined carbs are going to help our blood sugar. It's going to convert more slowly to glucose. It's going to provide us nutrients. And how can we go for whole grains? You go for unrefined, right? The more refined the grain, the closer it is to sugar, and the more quickly it will convert to sugar. And the biggest bang for your buck is going to be swapping white for brown, bread, rice, pasta, right? And if you consume these with protein and healthy fats, again, it's going to stabilize your blood sugar. Okay, veg and fruits. I know you all know about these. Why do we need them? Because it gives us lots of great nutrients. And we need all those nutrients for all the processes of the brain and body. It's going to give us fiber. It's good for digestive health, great for weight management. And how you want to do it. I don't try to overthink anything when it comes to food, but what the basic rules would be go for variety of color and item. You don't need to think about what foods give you zinc, what foods give you magnesium. If you look at your shopping trolley and make sure that you have lots of different colors in it, it's a great start. Aim to fill half your plate with veg, more veg than fruit. And great ways to increase your vegetable content would be through salads, smoothies, stir fries. Okay, questions, supplements. Do you need them? The only times that you need supplements could be if you're deficient in a nutrient, or you don't have enough. If it's difficult to get through the food. So for example, magnesium, it is difficult to get enough through the food because of soil depletion. Supplements are great when you're targeting a specific need. If your body needs something, if it needs a specific herb and you can target that. And otherwise, except for those 3 points, you probably don't need it, right? Excuse me. When choosing a supplement, consider what's the right dosage. Yeah, very often a therapeutic dose is difficult to find. How do you take it? Should it be taken with fats? Do you take it on an empty stomach or with food? Is it better in the morning, better in the night? Quality makes a big difference, especially for things like fat soluble, things like omega-3. If the warehousing, for example, is too hot, then it can go rancid. Lots of things that can affect quality. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm going to stop soon and let you guys speak. Drug interactions, that's a really important one. I see very often clients that are taking medications that don't consider how that's going to interact with a given supplement. And the other note to say on supplements is they're not nothing. Like, yeah, I would take caution in taking supplements. It's not it is a form of, let's say, medication. It really should be taken quite carefully. Okay, the last point is hormone therapy, yes or no. I'm not going to tell you. I'm sorry. I'm not a doctor, but this is what I want to show you, which is what the research says. The moral to this story is there's a window of opportunity. And if menopause tends to be around here, this is what they call the window, actually, this is the window of opportunity. Because before age 60 or 10 years post-menopause, you're still going to get good benefits, potential benefits from it, and you're going to have reasonably low risks associated with it. But that switches from age 60. From age 60, you're going to have less benefit from it, and you're going to have more potential risk from it, which is why generally doctors they won't give hormone therapy to someone past the age of 60 or 10 years past menopause. The other thing, that 10-year window, depends which doctor you talk to, or which research paper you read, but it's because from menopause, the brain is going through a whole recalibration. And if it goes through that, it's a new norm. It doesn't have the hormones that function the way that they used to. So it has to readjust. And if it goes through that process of readjustment, and then suddenly you introduce hormone therapy, it's not going to work, right? So, and then just one point, this is the Women's Health Initiative. This was the research that was done in, I think it was 2002. And so again, I'm not saying anything for or against hormone therapy. This is not my remit. But there was a lot of controversy around this study. And when this study first came out, it was concluded that hormone therapy caused heart disease, bad cognition, cancer, stroke. There were two major flaws with that study that we learned about after. One is that the average age of the woman was 62 years old. So she was already in this health risk. They were already in that health risk category. And it's from that actually that we learned that, okay, there's this window of opportunity. And the other major flaw with that study is that it was that what hormones were they giving to these women? The estrogen was coming from horse urine, which is not the same as our estrogen, and the progesterone was synthetic progestin, both of which are associated with cancer risks. Okay. So here's what you want to ask your doctor. Yeah, if you want to look into hormone therapy. First of all, synthetic versus body identical. You don't want synthetic, right? And it's not about, yeah, everything. I'm not saying everything synthetic is bad, but when it comes to hormone therapy, it is. What you want is, if you're going to do it, you want body identical. Usually for estrogen, it is. For progesterone, often doctors will give progestin or progestogen. It's not the same as progesterone. Okay. So just so you know that these two, they're synthetic. They look like progesterone. They're not progesterone. In fact, molecularly, they're closer to testosterone than progesterone. The method of delivery is important in terms of the risk. The safest way to take estrogen is vaginally because it doesn't bypass the liver. After that, gel, patch, spray tend to be the more safe delivery. The highest risk of estrogen is oral. Progesterone is okay, but estrogen, oral would be the highest risk of these. Okay. And again, if you take it early in menopause, you're going to get more, theoretically, more benefit. If you take it later, there's more risk. And it's also not recommended for anyone who's had an estrogenic cancer. So that means who's had it or who has at risk of it because of family history. So that would be of breast, ovary, uterus. Okay. Last thing I want to say, and then it's really over to you, is that menopause really is about more than hot flushes. And I hope that that message has been conveyed. It's not the end of the road, but it is a new chapter of life, right? There's a new norm, and it's going to affect everything. So we have to address it in an integrated way. What's good for menopause? I get asked a lot. I've heard this is good for menopause. Is this good for menopause? That question doesn't mean anything because menopause is not a symptom, it's a phase of life. So it's like saying, I've heard that this is good for a teenage girl. Well, good for what? And good for which teenage girl? For what reason? So whatever is going to be good for menopause is going to be whatever supports your overall health, right? When it comes to food, don't try to be perfect. It's not worth it. You're still living and food is still to be enjoyed, but better over perfect. Okay. Hormone therapy, I don't know, but my advice would be do your research and look into if you're going to go that approach, look into it soon before or after menopause, because if you wait too long, it's too late. Okay. And the final point is that every woman is different, and I cannot emphasize that enough. These are my contact details. In case you have any questions or want to be in touch, this is how you reach me. And really, I'm done speaking. I'm going to stop recording. Oops. Oops, sorry. Stop recording.